Right, so I have returned once again today to actually deliver a stream of Zombieland Saga Revenge. Sorry, I actually didn't turn on my headphones as well beforehand. God damn, 2 adverts, really? Right, actually all good to go. So anyway, yes, she have returned to actually episode 9 of Zombieland Saga Revenge. As episode 8 actually was once again really damn good. It was quite the eye-opening episode. It really does delve very much deeply into the lore of this whole entire show, because I wasn't really expecting this show to kind of have extremely deep lore, but it does. It has a very, very vast history. It does span a lot of generations that do then answer some questions in the present. I thought that's actually kind of cool. And actually, it was kind of nice to actually kind of center around Yugiri, one of the most mysterious characters in the whole entire show, because we literally know nothing about her at this very one point. But I like how her backstory actually served to actually then develop also the entire world at the exact same time, actually answer possibly a lot of questions we actually had originally. There's a lot of the theories we've already been having have been fan theories at this point. They've been actually confirmed. So now that we actually kind of have some semblance of confirmation with certain characters, actually kind of cool. Anyway, it's actually put on. It's actually gone live. Put that there. Let's put that there. Let's put that there. Also get rid of that. So, actually all good to go. So as always say, hello, hello, how's it going? Let's actually get shown a road. Actually start this thing in 3, 2, 1. Start this thing absolutely now. It's also had the actual like possibility of Yugiri's actual fate as well in this episode. I also kind of like the idea of the plot being about the idea of like reclaiming something that's been lost, but actually the gravitas of how it is in different generations. So it's kind of interesting because in today's like timeline of Zombieland Saga, it's mostly just about them about Kotaro actually kind of bringing Saga onto the map and actually bring it back to life in a way, pardon the pun. But in this context, actually kind of is seen very differently. And I like how it is that depending on what part of history it actually kind of falls into, the actual way to reclaim something is very different. That's kind of neat. Now, I'm trying to remember if I said Dallas or Dynasty last week when I mentioned about who shot JR. That was bugging me all week. I was like, wait a minute, did I say Dallas or did I say Dynasty? If I said Dynasty, I meant Dallas. So it's Dallas actually is who shot JR, if I remember correctly. I'm like saying things I don't think many people actually know about, besides like me, because I'm just my family used to watch that show all the time. But yeah, I mean, on topic, this show is going to a very interesting point. Because let's be real, the sequel actually has come out of nowhere. As a sequel, this show is like vastly different to what's expecting. Essentially, this is what every single sequel should aspire to be, like a very, very deep, very much developing kind of show. A lot of sequels just tend to kind of do the exact same thing again, but each night 10 times. I want to see a backstory as well, to be honest, but I imagine we probably won't see it this season, unless that's actually the end of the whole entire season itself. In other shows, they tend to actually kind of just have season 2 as just a backdrop to actually have more events. Well, on one hand, the show did do that, but on the other hand, it actually did its damnedest to actually kind of develop every single character in the show. And I actually kind of appreciate that, because you don't see that too often. And actually, it's kind of nice, actually, is from a genre that's very overly saturated at this point. Because, I mean, last season we had 2 or 3 idol shows, I think, in one season. all of which were very vastly different in quality. So it's actually kind of nice to actually have a show that does sort of do something completely different. There is the possibility that there is a little bit more. He's a little bit more than we actually led him to believe originally, because he actually was. From the end of last episode, it kind of puts him in a very different light. Pardon the pun, I guess, because it's actually taking place in a photography studio with lights. Honestly, it'd be really interesting to see this actually does have a lot more ramifications involved. Now, here's the thing. I now really want a Meiji era season of Zombieland Saga now, to be honest. It's really fascinating. I want the whole entirety of the Saga War to be animated now. I want to know what happened. Also, kind of glad to actually see the prevailing theory on him, the grandfather, actually is or might actually be true in the end. Honestly, this show's actually like this show is brilliant though. I know I say it like often, but man, this show is actually really good. It keeps on throwing curveballs at you. You don't really expect. You're like, wait a minute, really? You're like, holy shit, all right. It's actually kind of cool. Well, that's quite interesting. That's quite an interesting reaction. That actually is kind of actually also is quite interesting. The idea that again he's taking a more like passive role, not trying to start a war, and the entire thing is literally like, yeah, there would in theory be a lot of animosity involved if you actually saw the place you actually once knew basically die. It's one of those unavoidable things in the end. And there we go. I like the idea. I like the contrast. Actually, it's really fascinating because it actually is one of those things that it is at the backdrop of a very interesting period in time as well. I don't know. I kind of find things fascinating. It's one of those things. Once history kind of pops in, I'm like, all right, I'm all attentive. It's kind of interesting because it's one of those things that, yeah, he wants to actually bring it back in a very like not violent manner, while at the center of it all is a place that does sort of not allow it to happen in essence, because you actually, as you saw with the entire conversation that we're having, there's too much emotion behind there that they actually would not be able to actually let it just go by. And also the possibility that the idea of actually being able to actually reform and actually bring back somewhere by just talking and doing stuff like that possibly might not actually bring it back the way he expects. So I do wonder whether or not a rebellion actually does happen. And that possibly might in theory be the catalyst to what happens to Yugiri as well, because she's implicated. Oh, let's tie it. Ah, you can't get one past me, Mapper. I see you. I'm onto you, boys. I'm onto you. Well, the very crucial time to wake up as well. The very crucial time. Honestly, they actually could make a whole entire series out of this. There's so much here you actually can expand upon. Damn. Man, this show is fantastic. This show is so fucking good. Holy shit. Oh. You get to the rescue. As said, I actually do really want a whole entire series out of this now. I will campaign for it, I swear to God. I will campaign for a season of this, just taking place in the Meiji era. Probably will actually read it after the season ends, actually. I probably might actually read it after the season ends. This is basically the, so it makes sense to why, if I remember correctly, Yugiri actually meets, Yugiri and Kotaro actually meet a lot in the beginning of season 2 as well. And it actually does make sense now. Because it's essentially the beginning of season 2. Again, essentially. But, you know, without actually, you know, basically not doing so well in a concert versus actually kind of people dying instead. That's a major difference involved here. But it's sort of exactly the same thing. Kind of like how it does actually sort of answer a lot of questions that you didn't really kind of have originally, to be honest. You're like, oh, okay, alright. You didn't really have the question to begin with, but it actually sort of just answers it anyway. You're like, okay, alright, I like it. I appreciate it. Honestly, I remember one of this whole entire group. She actually does in Fury actually kind of very much don't the actual legendary status, to be honest. Okay, now it's fucking cool. That's fucking cool. It's kind of a good shot, to be honest. Kind of the cool shit about this whole entire episode, it kind of does have, like, it feels very much it has a similar feel to like the Shambara and Jidageki films of like the yesteryear essentially, if I'm remembering my terms correctly. It has that kind of level of feel to it. It has a feel. It feels very much like a film straight from the 50s or 60s or the 30s actually. Don't know how to explain it, but it does sort of remind me a lot of that kind of era of filmmaking, especially in Japan as well, or Japanese filmmaking primarily, I mean. God, this episode is like a fucking 11 out of 10. Holy shit. Where does this episode come from? This series is like an 11 out of 10 normally, but Jesus Christ. Holy fucking shit. Oh well, it actually does in theory actually go through in the end. And the cool thing is, she actually does in theory actually see the new Saga in the end as well. So it's actually kind of sweet in the end when you think about it. Her being resurrected actually kind of very see the actual fruits of everyone's actual actions. So it's actually kind of sweet. Even though, yeah, her ending was relentlessly fucking depressing. But at the same time, it does actually sort of actually have, like, a kind of sweet underlining thing towards it as well. I always will say, and I will repeat it, please give me a whole entire season just dedicated to the Meiji era, please. I beg of you. She even got her own song as well this episode. Oh, she actually went there as well! It's the little things. The show has the little things in it as well. Oh man. Do I sense this show creeping into my top 10 of all time when it comes to anime as well, to be honest? Then this show's like, this show's just fucking brilliant. Honestly, it's like, it's legit to me like it's perfect. The show's perfect. There's not one single beat out of place. Maybe I'm also kind of lamenting the idea of actually haven't seen a good Shambara movie in years. I haven't seen a Shambara movie in years either, to be honest. It is kind of nice actually doing Fury intersperse it with the actual period it's actually alive in as well. I actually kind of feel that's actually kind of like a nice full circle. Holy shit. Holy shit. I even got the photo as well. Even got the photo as well. I'm actually heading into the final stretch of the whole entire series as well. I just forgot. I actually forgot we're actually ending the season in about 3 weeks. Oh man, that was fucking amazing. Oh, makes also like I also really just like Meiji era stuff anyway. But still, fuck me, that was good. that was brilliant. It literally had everything. It had the entire plot basically come full circle. It gives more meaning to every single interaction we've had thus far. And it kind of does actually kind of have parallels. The idea of like the moment where Yugi is actually kind of consoling him in the past. The whole entire moment very much echoes what happened at the beginning of season 2. The idea of when Sakura actually comes and actually basically says, "Bro, get up, we're doing this shit." And the same thing applies here, and it actually doesn't really give him the push to continue on. And I kind of like how, in a way, things are starting to echo each other in different periods of time, but just through the lens of the descendant rather than the actual same person. Because otherwise, that'd be very kind of interesting if that was the case. But I also kind of like the idea that it does have, because a lot what at the center of this whole entire narrative is a bunch of characters that are from different periods of time. I like how in the past a lot of it actually had to do with modernization. The idea of actually a lot of what he wanted to bring back a place, but it was impossible with the way the actual place was around him. I kind of like that because it was his idea that you got to see how much the world was changing around him, and also how that in of itself kind of posed a lot of things against him. But at the same time, the idea of actually what was going on, what actually happened originally, does actually still then bear scars. Actually, then not allow the people to actually kind of like let it go. So I kind of appreciate that. We actually had the whole entire idea that it's not just okay, we want to actually bring back Saga, we want to bring it back actually gain independence as well. It's not just that, it's the idea that what happened originally does still kind of persist. It's one of those things that it makes sense to why they would actually act the way they do, even though he doesn't want war to start. It's one of those things that it's unavoidable in the context of what was actually truly going on in that era. So I like how all those avenues were explored. The idea of like the passive, the idea of like the people who want to actually take action, but more in a kind of like not just sit back, actually let the whole entire world change around them, will actually not allow them to actually kind of not be able to actually get back the place they want, but rather actually take action. And actually then the actual like eventual outcome actually doesn't really happen in the end. I like how all those things were explored. It's actually a really interesting plot because it does have quite a lot going on in it. That's why I said that this show, in these 40 minutes we actually had with the past, has so much to expand upon. You actually could in theory make a whole entire season out of it, and it would be fascinating. Even though we know the ending, we know what happens to Saga in the end, it's still one of those things we don't necessarily know the point. I guess we're on point B of this in the 40 minutes we actually see. We kind of see point C in title cards. We actually didn't know point A. Point A is still somewhat of a mystery. So in of itself, that kind of poses an actual very interesting season of itself, just kind of exploring the idea of what actually happens, or what happened as well. And disperse it with the actual past of the characters as well, because again, there's this idea that you can't like not think that you saw all of the characters we have in the present in the past. So I actually want to see who they were back then a bit more than just random interspersed scenes, because it would be actually kind of cool to see how much they actually are the same or different in the past and actually on the present. But yeah, I mean, other than that, this episode was fucking brilliant. I loved it. I thought it had the makings of probably one of the best of the whole entire year. I must say, it echoed a lot of like the cinema from the 1950s as well. I kind of really appreciate it because I was kind of sitting here going, I've seen this quite a bit back in the day. I'm saying as if I was actually born in the 50s. I was born in the 90s. But when I was studying, I kind of saw a plot like this quite often. The idea of like wanting to reclaim something that's lost, and actually then fighting for it, but then actually having the very different opposing forces involved as well. And the idea of actually it's not just It's not just the characters or the people of that era, it's actually the place itself. And I kind of like how you see that quite often a lot in this kind of media. The idea is not just the people, it's not just the era, it's actually the place as well. The place itself is very much a epicenter of problems as well, and I kind of like that, because again, it's one of those things that you don't necessarily kind of look at the idea of like the place itself quite often in other like films and TV shows. It's one of those things like the era can do a lot of things, actually kind of then propel certain things forward, and actually then restrict a lot of things as well. And I kind of like how we actually were looking at the idea of actually how Saga was actually viewed in this era, and actually then subsequently the actual Japan of that era as well, and actually how everyone else was acting around that. Stuff like that is fascinating. I kind of like how this show does deal with that, because it's one of those things you don't see too often. You don't see the place itself being explored as well. And yeah, I mean, goddamn. I just really like this show. It's fantastic. It's one of those shows that, again, literally has come out of fucking nowhere. Like, it literally, I had no idea this show would be this good. Like, I thought season 1 was brilliant. Season 1 was like, oh my god, this is like a 9 out of 10 show. I actually think I could actually give it 9 out of 10 in the end. I also think I actually call it one of the best of the whole entire decade as well. But then season 2 was like, hold my beer, bro, I've got you. I'm like, how the fuck they actually managed to actually kind of pull this off? And actually then give you getting actual full cycle character arc as well in the middle of the whole entire thing was kind of cool. I mean, yeah, her untimely end was depressing, because it's one of those things that the way she actually kind of went out, you're like, fuck, man, that ain't good vibes at all. No good vibes all round. But then I actually kind of like how she didn't see the Saga that he would envisioned at that point in time, but she saw it in the end. She saw how Saga actually developed as well, and actually saw a new era Saga as well. And she's seen Saga actually rejuvenated, the correct term, again through a different period in time. I kind of like that. Again, it kind of echoes a lot of the idea that both periods are paralleling each other in the way they're actually dealing with events, just very differently. I kind of like how that's actually kind of like the main focal point, but I kind of like how she actually is now experiencing a new age of Saga. It actually is kind of nice, because it actually kind of gives the whole entire thing this very sweet undertone to it. It otherwise wouldn't be there had it just kind of said, well, she died. And that was it. It was actually kind of nice that we actually kind of saw her actually now regain who she was, and actually then subsequently also actually see a new Saga firsthand. So that's actually kind of cool. And yeah, I mean, it was really nice. I also kind of like how it took place in a snowy period of time as well, because snow always is one of those. It's something I actually see a lot in Japanese cinema. Actually, use of snow. I don't see snow too often anywhere else, but in Japanese cinema, especially in the 50s, and subsequently also before that point, snow was actually utilized very heavily often. Correct term. Heavily often. A lot, basically. But it's one of those ideas. You actually, it's the change. Snow always signifies a change in seasons. It's a signifier immediately. The same thing when you see dying leaves on a tree. It's actually signify autumn. So I actually kind of like how it was very much like how they utilized the actual period of time, the period in which it took place, to actually then signify the change that was actually kind of transpiring within Japan at that time. It was kind of cool. Again, adds more meaning to the whole entire thing. Because otherwise, snow, rain, and shit like that is very cliched. But when it's actually utilized in this kind of lens, it takes on a completely different meaning. It's really kind of cool. And I actually kind of like that show. I actually kind of like the show for doing that as well. I mean, I actually imagine my entire thoughts are very, very sporadic this week, but it's actually one of those things that my brain can't believe how good this episode actually was. I just want to say a lot of things. My brain doesn't know how to actually kind of structure them at all. But hopefully what I said actually makes sense. I don't know if it does, but hopefully it does. Either way, the show's brilliant. That's the major thing. The show's fantastic. The show's like 11 out of 10 at this point. Probably top 10 of all time, actually, I must say. It's just so good. And I really hope they continue this on after season 2, because god, they have a gold mine here when it comes to like what they can do, especially from the past, the present, the future as well. There's so many things you can in theory do with this whole entire plot now. And yeah, I mean, can't wait for the actual final stretch of this whole entire series. Hopefully, actually might in theory get Taya waking up. Who knows? That'll be the icing on the cake, actually, to be honest. So until next time, I have indeed been the driver. So as always, if you actually have enjoyed this whole entire show and doing through, as always, leave a like because it does help quite a bit. If you have then enjoyed this whole entire show and doing through, always doing through, also leave a subscription as well because both do help quite a lot. If you have then enjoyed this whole entire show and doing through, also leave a follow on Twitter because it does help quite a bit. Actually, will then know when the streams go live and any other streams I do as well. And as always, ご視聴ありがとうございます。僕のところを面白いと思ったらいいねやチャンネル登録をお願いします。So next episode 10 of